Welcome to the Matt Report, a podcast for building businesses with WordPress. Subscribe to the Matt Report at mattreport.com/subscribe. And now your host, Matt.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Matt Report, Season 3, Episode 3 with Chris Lema. I just recently talked to Brad Williams from his episode 3 years ago. Now I'm talking to Chris, which I also coincidentally talked to about 3 years ago, at least on this podcast. And today is kind of giving us a recap of where he's at. He is no longer part of the crowd favorite agency, so we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about what his new adventures are in the WordPress space. And we're also going to talk about the WordPress freelancer, right? Understanding what it's like to be a freelancer and making the comparisons of a freelancer of 3 years ago to where they might be at today, where you might be at in your own business in the WordPress world. And he's going to kind of draw those comparisons up for us and sort of talk about that. So definitely a great interview. And again, of course, Chris is well known in the WordPress space, so he's going to share some information on what he's got working on, or what he's working on next, which is going to be real fun and real interesting to see unfold. So I do hope you enjoy this episode. If you do, we'd love a 5-star review in iTunes. Head on over to iTunes, search for us there on Matt Report, and give us a 5-star review if you like the show. We're trying to get to 100 5-star reviews by the end of the year. I think we're at 80 right now. So if we could push that to the edge, that'd be great. This is one of the last episodes before we begin the new podcast as well, Plugged In Radio. That'll be airing really soon. So this will be, by the time you hear the next episode of the Matt Report, Plugged In Radio will be in full swing with episode number 1. So if you want to jump on the newsletter, the announcement list for that, head on over to pluggedinradio.com, sign up in the little email box there, and you'll be one of the first few folks to know when that goes live. And in fact, I actually secured my first sponsor for the month of Plugged In Radio, and that's going to be Restrict Content Pro by Pippin's Plugins. It's a great new, well, I shouldn't say new, it's a relaunch of a well-known membership plugin for WordPress, and those folks were very kind to support us for the first month of Plugged In Radio. So check it out. Check out both Restrict Content Pro and Plugged In Radio. Let's dive into the conversation with Chris Lema.
And what you do in the WordPress space.
I help predominantly product companies make more money, get more traction. I help them think through their product strategies and help them navigate the WordPress ecosystem. Beyond that, I write a blog, and I've spun up a couple more. So turns out this blog thing is sticking around, and I do that. And I do some private coaching and consulting with a variety of companies at a bunch of different levels to help them kind of run their business. So I'm that guy.
You're that guy. You are that guy. In episode 41, we talked about how to become a great WordPress freelancer, right? I think back then, might be fair to say that was the high point. A few years ago, that was the high point on everybody diving into becoming a freelancer. I'm gonna spearhead this WordPress thing head on, or at least from my perspective, I saw a lot of folks doing that. And 2-3 years into it now, I see a lot of those folks have sort of maybe given up on the cause, or
real estate agents.
Yeah, now they're real estate agents
doing other things, right?
Yeah. What is it? What is is it the unknown of running a business that is the particular challenge to most folks? Like they see, look how easy this technology thing is. I think I can resell this for 40% margin. And then they get into it and they're like, oh shit, this is a lot harder than I thought it was. Sort of throwing this question right at you, but what do you think that is?
So I've spent the last 6 weeks on vacation, which is crazy to say. And I spent a lot of time in the hot tub and smoking cigars. And I got on a call. I'm not joking. I got on a call 2 days ago, and he said, the guy said, I like to surround myself with people who are doing really incredible things. And I thought, wow, that's like, I don't know if I'm getting pulled into the inner circle, but this is fantastic. And he said, and I've watched you. And again, I'm thinking he's watched me start up companies and sell companies. He's watched me run big, large companies. He's watched me step in. And he's like, and I have seen several weeks of photos of you sitting in a hot tub smoking a cigar, and I want what you have. Like, how do I get that? And I'm like, yeah, that is what we do, right?
Right.
We look at the, at the one tiny snapshot, and we go, I want that, right? And as you know, right, the only way that I can currently live off revenue from chrislema.com is because of the 5 years of work that went into chrislema.com. Right? Not like last week I spun up, 2 weeks ago I spun up a new blog, and that's not generating a penny, and it won't generate a penny forever. Like, it's just like, you put in a whole bunch, there's a grind, there is a process, and I think what happens is, and I mentioned real estate before, but real estate has this ridiculously high attrition, right? If a person steps in to be a realtor, and that's a NAR term, that's a National Association of Realtors, they've coined this term and said, we're the ones that get to define if someone's a realtor, right? And so they go through a process and they become a realtor, and the attrition on a yearly basis is something like 30%. Right? I mean, it's massively high because everybody sees the pinnacle, the highlight, I just sold a multi-million-dollar house, and my, 3% or 4% commission is this much, and I drive a BMW, which, by the way, they leased, and, they're in a big house, but it's because their spouse, works at a big corporate gig, and you just get this little snapshot and you think, I want to be a WordPress freelancer, right? I often recommend that people have a conversation with my friend Steve Zengit, who's here in Southern California and runs a company called Zeek. Zeek just celebrated, I think, 20 or 21 years in business, right? And if you ask Steve, okay, so you've been doing WordPress or mobile development for 21 years. He's like, nope. Initially, it was Shockwave games, and it was in the little banner ads, right? The game was in the ad on the top of the browser, and then it was movie studio websites with Flash games, and then it was just Flash apps, and then it was WordPress apps, and then it was mobile apps. And here's the reality, right? You want to grind it out, run your own business, and do stuff. It's going to mean constant evolution of the business dynamics, of your own professional skills. It's gonna require a lot of work, and so I think what we see is, and I think you were right, there's a lot of people that jumped in commercially about 5 or 6 years ago, even some 7, though those are the real old companies that we know of. But there's a bunch of commercial ones that jumped in, say, 5 years ago, and then a bunch of freelancers that jumped in about 2 years ago. And you see this kind of wave of momentum, and then you watch all the attrition, right? The people that just kind of fall off and go, this got hard. Suddenly there's competition. I don't know how to differentiate myself. I've sold all the websites I can to all my mom's friends, and now I have to do something for real, or I've lost too much money on this thing, right? Every time I bid a job, I keep losing money, and I keep thinking I'm getting better, or I'm raising my rates. And guess what? I just raised my rates into the realm of a competitor that is so much better than me that I will lose all those jobs because I raised my rates to the point where now someone says, well, if I'm going to pay that much, I might as well hire those guys, not you. So I think there's a lot of different factors that go into it, but at the core of it, I think we all watch people's highlight reels and we go, I want that life, and we don't know the backstory.
Right. I think folks can listen to this podcast, listen to the advice that you put out, listen to the advice that our good friend Troy Dean puts out. And at the end of the day, it's still one of those 80-20 rules that kicks in where, sure, you can get all this great sort of pre-sales advice and, how to scope a project perfectly. But folks have to realize that this stuff is always in motion. It's never just going to be take it off the shelf, reuse it in your business, and it's always going to be that 1, 2, 3, that 3-step process. Same thing with clients, right? We write and we talk about all the stuff about attracting the right clients and managing client expectations, but the client is always going to vary, and that's the dynamic that I think is the hardest part of this business that people just can't wrap their heads around, or deal with the fact that, not every situation is going to go perfect like you read on, in that PDF or that you heard on the airwaves of this podcast. And you're going to deal with some of the cruff, and it's going to be the customer that doesn't want to pay all that money right now. But you know what? you got bills to pay. You might have to suck it up, take a little bit less, and push forward and move on to the next client, right? So I think there's that 20% that's always going to be so difficult that people just think that because they feel prepared, it's not really going to happen, right? Because clients, or just random technology stuff crops up.
I think one of the things that happens is you listen to an expert, and let's just give them the credibility. Let's just assume for a brief moment that whoever is talking to you is an actual expert. Like, because we could get into all the people I think aren't experts. But this would be a very, very long show. So just imagine out in the whole world. I'm not talking about just in the WordPress ecosystem. I'm talking about everyone out there who is selling a training program, a curriculum, an educational, a podcast, a blog that's writing advice. Everyone, me, you, everyone. Let's assume that we're all experts. Okay? In order to develop that expertise, you have to have done it a whole bunch of times. What you don't realize out of that is assuming the best case scenario that someone is an expert. They also have picked up 20, 30, 40,000 lessons in the process that they don't realize they've picked up and they don't articulate. One of my closest friends, the current CEO, my former boss, and the current CEO of Crowd Favorite, was asked I was just at the business conference Prestige in Minneapolis, and he was asked this question, and it was a great question that people were, like, what do you do when the customer doesn't send the check in or whatever, right? It's a common question, it's a common problem, it's a great question. And my friend Kareem was like, well, I think it kind of depends, and he's hemming and hawing, and he's trying to think through, like, what's the best way to answer this. Partially because his clients are much bigger than the person who's asking the question, right? I get it. When he's done, I raise my hand. I'm like, I'd like to give you one of the tricks that Kareem uses because I've sat in the room and I've watched him do it. And I explain, here's what he does, right? Because these big clients often have a second project they want in the wings or a third project. And I said, he doesn't move forward on project 2 or 3. He waits and holds them up. And the moment I said, now that's a no-brainer, right? Like that's like no duh for me, you, for him. It's no duh, but it's so no duh, right? It is so obvious that it doesn't even come to Kareem's mind as a trick he uses, right? Because he's just like, well, that's just obvious, right? And here's the problem with experts. To an expert, they have attained a tremendous amount of what they consider to be obvious data, obvious tricks, obvious techniques that they don't always share because they don't come top of mind as, oh, here's this other thing. So even if I were to tell you everything I knew about building a SaaS or everything I knew about going up market or everything I knew about selling to the enterprise, even if I told you everything and I laid it out and I'm like, here's the 50-point plan, there'd be 200 other things I didn't list because they're no duh to me. They're just, well, yeah, like I just assumed that, right? And that is the hard part. When you're taking advice from someone else, you're getting, some of the best tips they have, but you're also not getting a tremendous amount of the exposure and experience that they actually do have, which is why mentoring, coming alongside, interning are far more valuable ways to learn something than just I bought the course, I went through the 6 steps, I watched 4 videos, and I bought the ebook, right? Because it's only when you're literally working under someone, sitting there, interning or doing whatever, that you see all the little things that you don't catch in all that other expertise. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that definitely does. I actually even think that you bring up a good point. There's all of these lessons that are along the way, and if we're giving advice to someone, even if it's just like advice in passing at like a WordCamp or in a Slack channel or whatever, I think that's those same lessons that you've learned are hard for us as the expert, no matter what level of client you're servicing and how many lessons you've learned throughout your journey. Even that is hard for us to convey to the customer, right? So in my world, I know sort of one of the things I'm always leading with when customers say, well, what's the difference between you and, XYZ agency? And I just say, look, our motive is to get this done for you, right? Which is so, and it's still something that I work on crafting, right? And it's telling them like, look, there are so many people that you're dealing with, especially if you're considering like a professional freelancer who might be, living the dream, as they say. We are here to get it done. You have a goal. we are going to attack that goal and get that done for you. Because I know there are other agencies or freelancers that, hey, you're just you're another cog in the wheel, and we'll get to it. We'll get it done for you sometime. Maybe past a deadline, maybe a little bit more money involved. Whereas we're saying, no, at this price, we are going to get it done for you. And even that is very difficult for me to convey. So, the point of that sort of rant is, even for us, right, as the people who deal with it and conveying it to clients, even that can be a challenge, right? It's certainly not easy. What have you seen at your time at Crowd Favorite, and even before that? Again, we talked 3 years ago on episode 41. Does the small business client still exist, right? Do you think most consultants are dealing with sort of what I'll call, five-figure, maybe $5,000 to $10,000 range for most freelancers today? Do you think that that's the majority, or do you think we're still sort of muddling around with the $500 client nowadays?
Oh, I think the $500 and the $1,000 and the $2,000 clients still exist, and they're more than ever. But I also think the $5,000 and $10,000 clients are there, and people are, some of them are slowly moving their way up there, right? I got to work on clients that were, $60,000, $100,000, and $500,000 clients as well when I was a Crowd Favorite. And so you see there's all different kinds of clients. What's really interesting is what goes into those projects, right? Because as you move up market, the code becomes a smaller and smaller part of the deliverable, especially if you're building systems, right? If you're building a system, it's sitting on top of WordPress. The amount of calls, meetings, requirements, all of that stuff just becomes, and the testing on the other end becomes so huge and critical that the actual writing of the code is a smaller portion. Whereas when you go down market, there's a lot less requirement, a lot less testing, and it's just, let's just write the code. So the code has, I think in general, and this is across the globe and not related just to WordPress, but code continues to become commoditized more and more. And so the differentiator among players, I think, is still a function of how well can you come alongside a business and help a business, rather than just how well can you string together HTML components. But I think there's still a whole lot of people that are looking for low price services. I think there's a lot of people that want one-off services, meaning fix this one thing, fix this other thing. So I recommend Codeable a lot for people who call me and say, Chris, I want your help on something. And I'm like, no, you really don't. Here's my rate. It's very expensive, and you can do this at Codeable. And they go to Codeable and they use it and they hire someone and they get the thing fixed and they're done and they pay. And then they send me a note saying, oh my God, you were so right. They're so good. And I got exactly what I wanted done. And, how do I thank you? I'm like, you don't. You're good. Just go on, move on. Just have fun. Yeah. So I think Codeable and others, who are playing in that space are definitely competing more to deliver that kind of one-off value and to deliver the small projects that previously some of the freelancers we know used to do. I think some of those freelancers are starting to move up market. But what you discover is when you move up market, everything changes, right? The length of the sale grows and the cost of the sale grows, and the timelines don't, right? Client still wants it fast, but the kind of support on the back end changes, and the time it takes to get payment changes, right? I mean, even if you're doing a $10,000 project, you might get the first $2,000 up front, but getting the mid project payment may take an extra month or two, even though you finish the code, and then getting the final payment may take you a while. And that, if you're going up market, you kind of have to be prepared for a different set of life cycles, a different set of timelines for collecting money, and that can be hard for some folks. Yeah, and I'm glad that you went into that, because this episode will air after the episode that, fingers crossed, goes out today, or at the very least tomorrow, which is with Brad Williams of WebDev. And again, his timeline from the last time he was on the show was 3 years, and back then he didn't have Discovery and Microsoft and all these big clients. So
getting the insights to the dealing with these executives and these corporate level customers or contacts, there's a big eye opener to him, right? And how he ran the business and what his expectations were. I know for me, once we started getting into sort of, enterprise-ish space or bigger customer space, the payment thing was a big eye opener. It's like, yes, we secured a $50,000 project. Oh wait, we're not getting paid on that until 90 days from now. Like what?
90 days of your life, right?
Right.
So then you're like, wait, I did all the work, and I still haven't gotten a single penny. How is this better?
Right. Yeah, exactly. But some of the stuff we talked about in that episode was it's great for if you're a freelancer or a boutique agency and you are looking for growth, because not everybody is. Some people are they're happy with what they're doing. But if you are looking for that growth, if you don't push into these areas that, one, you're afraid of, two, a little uncomfortable with, you're never really going to grow. Like, the customer isn't just going to be a perfect, walk in the park, land $100,000 check on your lap. One thing that I find interesting, though, I just want to finish up on the small business price point expectation, and I had this discussion with Mike McAllister of Array. We alluded to it a little bit. Is I think that freelancers, folks in our space, can actually spend just $1,000 on software, right, for getting a small business site up and running. If you just looked at buying a premium theme, let's say $79. Let's say you buy Opt-in Monster for $200. Affiliate WP or some easy digital download extensions to put together your typical digital marketing site, you're almost at $1,000 just in some software before the consultation, right? Before, as the freelancer, you actually consult on putting this all together and making it work for your customer. Is this a good thing for sort of WordPress products and product price points? Like, now we can actually collectively build an entire site for a few $1,000s and just plugins before we get to consulting. Is that good or bad? Do you have any thoughts on that sort of subject?
I do. So first of all, if you're a freelancer listening, I would say make sure your client buys those licenses and not you, right?
Yes.
So I keep repeating that, because when the client has a problem, I have a client that I built a website a few months ago. We launched it, and then 2 weeks ago they had some sort of issue, right? And so they sent me an email, and I don't have a support contract with them. And they're like friends of mine, but it was a real job with a real scope and a real budget and a good budget. And yet the project's done, right? And so I get the email, it says, hey, this happened, and I said, this is exactly why you have WP Engine, because you can call them. And this is exactly why you have your own account with Ninja Forms, because you can reach out to them. And I got an email 2 days ago that said, hey, by the way, I reached out to both of them. They totally took care of everything. That was awesome. Right? And you go, yes, this is because they have their own relationship with the vendors. I'm not in the middle, right? And I know a lot of freelancers, when they get started, put themselves in the middle to get that extra $2 or the extra $5, the extra $100, and you don't realize the downstream consequences of being in the middle until it's far too late. So just small caveat, right? Let's just make sure your client has their own relationship with the vendors for their own products, so that you can move on in life and not have to manage that for the rest of your days.
Absolutely.
Now, that said, it always amuses me when we talk about products and pricing that the answer, the right answer, the model has been sitting in front of us since we started working with WordPress, and yet everybody has tried other things. I fundamentally believe that if you're going to build a product that has a variety of price points, and you're tapping into different features at different prices, right? So whether you're talking about Opt-in Monster, you're talking about Ninja Forms, you're talking about whatever, and you're assigning your price based on features, that you're going to end up having this kind of regular anguish by prospective customers who are trying to figure out, well, which feature do I need, and will I need that? And that's how you end up with all those prices of all those sites and all the stuff. I think the reality is the commercial ecosystem could grow significantly if we made the distinction between, is your website a commercial entity or is your website non-commercial? And this has been sitting in the same way that I talk about, I think most plugins should think about SaaS. Akismet has been doing this since we started, right? And they're like, well, here's how we price it if you're non-commercial. and you can even like at one point I think you pick your own price. But if you're commercial, you pay. Like if you make money off your website, you pay. That's the way it goes. That's that, right? And I think the reality is the people who are building commercial sites and the people who are site owners of commercial sites should be prepared to pay that. And I would imagine that they should be prepared to pay just in solutions, tools, what have you, $1,500 to $2,500 a year, right? When you add all the plugin license and that they own, and you add hosting. And if you ask any business owner, right, any business owner of any physical reality business, like physical, like I ship boxes or I have a retail store, even a caterer who works out of their own kitchen, and you said, could you run your business off $2,500 a year? They'd look at you and be like, are you crazy?
Right.
Like you're insane, right? And yet, for some reason, these same commercial entities come online, and we all act like, well, I don't want to have to build. Like the number of people who are like, WooCommerce extensions are expensive, and I don't want our customers to have to pay this. And you're like, then maybe they shouldn't have a store, right? Like at the core of it, I don't know any. Like I've built sites for churches that spend $35,000 on a website, right? Just because they're like, listen, the core value proposition of what we're doing requires that we have streaming video every week. So I need the infrastructure to support that. Well, you'll need XYZ. They're like, great, whatever. Like, this is what I do. This is what I must do. Serious businesses understand that. So when you're working with serious commercial objectives and a commercial website, should they pay $1,000 a year just in plugin fees? Yes, they should. I totally believe they should. If they are a non-commercial entity, I can understand why they may want to limit their exposure and cost because they don't know if they'll make any money, right? And that's where you start looking at alternatives. Like, again, Ninja Forms is free, Gravity Forms isn't. If it does what you want it to do, maybe you start there. WP Forms, a recent release from my friend Syed Balki, has a lower price point to start. And so you start going, are these the ones you want? And then as you grow up, are you ready to spend some more money? And I think that's legit. But I think fundamentally, the fact that someone can build a site, getting back to the core of your question, fundamentally, the fact that someone can build a site today using a series of plugins that do have a cost, I think is still a good thing. It's what keeps those entities, those companies around, right? I would hate it. And you know my friend Syed from WP Beginner and from Opt-in Monster. If there was no money to be made out of this ecosystem, he'd just go make money somewhere else. He already makes money other places, right? He just goes somewhere else. So the ecosystem benefits from the fact that there's enough here that keeps him somewhat engaged so that he's like, well, a few of my companies can be in the WordPress space. So I think it's good. It's good for the overall ecosystem that people can buy these things. But I also think we need to make a stronger distinction between non-commercial and commercial sites, and really have the expectation that commercial sites can and should spend $1,500 to $2,500 a year on their plugins and hosting. And if they did, the commercial space for plugins, if they did that, the commercial space for plugins, the GDP of WordPress plugins, just for the commercial entities alone, would probably get 3/4 of the way to $1 billion a year in revenue, and the companies we know are not making that, right? If you take all the sum of the companies making commercial plugins, they're not generating $750 million out of the space, but they should be.
Right. So let me. I totally agree. Right. Agree on all the points. I think one thing, especially from the perspective that I see from offering the typical freemium model with our themes, is, hey, download it for free. If you upgrade to Pro, not only do you get our support and immediate updates, but you also get these extra features on the theme side. And not often, but the particular worry for me would be, let's say I offered all of my Pro themes for free, except for commercial use. How do I draw the line? How does a WordPress product owner draw the line between support and it's time to pay, right, for this kind of thing? Because I don't get it often, but every now and again the customer will dangle the whole, like, if you answer this question for me, I'll upgrade, right? Like, yes, I know what that means, right? You will not upgrade. You just want this question answered for you. So any thoughts on how the WordPress product owner would position him or herself to say, okay, I'll give everything for free, and if you're a commercial, tell me you're commercial and buy this license. Any thoughts?
Well,
on that?
this is where I also think the commercial side goes along with the SaaS side, right? Because if the SaaS side is there, then you have this potential. And I know I'm speaking about a world that doesn't exist, so I get that. But it has existed in the form of Akismet this whole time, right? It's been there the whole time. But I think when you have the ability to turn off a product remotely, like, hello, sir, I just discovered that you are commercial. There are PayPal links all over your site. There are, WooCommerce checkout is installed and active. I want to send you this bill, and if you don't pay this bill, I'm more than happy to turn your features off, right? And that sounds draconian, it sounds horrible and whatever, but the reality is this is the nature if you don't pay the bill, you don't get the product, right? So right. I understand the notion of open source. I understand the notion to freely distribute. I understand all that. But in my business, if I'm building out a product in this space, I want to charge commercial, not commercial. And one of the ways I can test that is I can regularly build the spiders, the monitors to check for commercial activity, and then I can decide to say pay up or it's time to turn this off, right? Sure. So I think you'd have to do something in the realm of SaaS to really have more control, because if you're doing distributed packages of software where they just pull it down and they can do whatever they want, and you're like, no, please, really, please, can you pretty please pay me? Like that's just foolish, right? So I understand that's not. Yeah. Please donate. There's a link. Please click it.
Right.
But we've built an entire ecosystem around the ease to step into it, right? And so the ease of stepping in is the ease of building a simple plugin, a little plugin, something that doesn't do much. And I think everyone should start there. But I think if you're going to make real money, I think you really ought to look at SaaS as a model that allows you to have a better understanding of what's going on and better control over making sure that you're getting paid by the right people.
Yeah, for sure. And just a side note that I wanted to add in there, just from like a ripple effect of things that I can see happening is even folks like Pippin, who recently introduced, I can't remember that. I think it's just called recurring payments for easy digital downloads. Even those little, what I'll call innovations, will actually dramatically potentially help the WordPress product space, right? Because now people will be accustomed to, because so many of us will be implementing recurring payments with our products, customers will now sort of get into this rhythm or consistency of, I guess I have to pay annually for this, right? Because it's just, now there's this thing that automatically bills me and it's just there, instead of us pleading, please upgrade. You have 30 days to renew your license. You have 15 days left to renew your license. So I think by innovating on these systems that we use to sell products, we're going to start to see in a year's time from now that customers are just accustomed to paying for the year, which is, I think, a good thing.
Yeah. So if you try and buy a WooCommerce extension right now, Automatic has already turned on the please give us your credit card, and this is an annual fee. Like they're in the subscription model business already right now with the Woo Themes extensions for WooCommerce. So I think people are moving that way. Pippin has obviously made it available for people who are building their own version of a solution to sell software. I think the thing is about getting those payments and getting customers ready to pay is that, and I'm opinionated, so we'll just start with that.
Welcome to the show.
Yeah. Most WordPress product companies suck at marketing. So because they suck at marketing, here's the way the email flow goes. On day one, you get 5 emails, right? PayPal sends you an email saying, thank you for this payment. I send you a receipt that says, thank you for this payment. I send you a welcome email from the CEO saying, hi, I'm the CEO, and I seriously wrote this handwritten note just for you, which isn't true, but I just want to let you know I'm here in case you need me. Then I get another email that says, here's your details and the license key, whatever. So all of a sudden, on day one, I get flooded with like 4 or 5 emails. Day 3, I get an email that says, hope you're doing well. Here's our support channel and our support way to get if you have any questions. Day 7 or day 14, I get an email that says, come rate us on whatever infrastructure I want a rating on, right? Whether it's the repo or anything else. And that's the end of day 7. And then on day 330, I get an email that says, hey, your license is about to expire in 30 days, right? And you're like, seriously?
Right.
Like, I haven't thought about you for a year.
Right.
You've potentially added no value to my life over a year. Your email basically just says, hey, thanks for buying at the front end. And at the end, it says, hey, come buy again. And that's it. That's the extent of the relationship we have with customers. And so we're shocked when customers are like, nah, I haven't used your support all year. Why would I sign up for another year of support? Well, but without this, you won't get support. Yeah, guess what? Wasn't getting a lot of support, right? Wasn't asking for it, wasn't getting it. I'm not mad at you, but hey, I'm not sure I need it, right? Well, but you need to be able to update your software. All right, well, if it turns out I need to, I'll renew then. Like when I have a need, not when you have a need for my money, right? And so in the end, that is not a subscription problem. That is not a technology problem. That is not a business model problem. That is a fundamental client communication, relationship management, marketing problem. And if you don't, if your whole staff, if your team of product people are all engineers, they're going to do all the work they can to figure out how to do drip email send-offs, but they'll never ask themselves the question, what should go out to my customers? And what should I pay attention to? And again, this is one of the benefits of SaaS. Most of the products I've ever spent, building have all had that ability to introspect the system over time and see the ways we've added value. And when you can find out how your product has added value to an organization, you can just circle back and tell them, like, hey, this month we caught these errors and this is what we did to fix them for you automatically without you knowing. Or, hey, this month we noticed you sent this many emails. We're so glad that we were able to support you with this, right? Some way to keep communicating value so that when it comes time to renew, people are like, yeah, of course, I must do this. Like, I want to do this. I am excited to do this. Can I renew early? Not just, I forgot I even had you, or I forgot I bought you. Thanks for that email. Right? That's a marketing problem. And that's a problem most companies have.
Right. No, I totally agree. And that's not even for products. That's for services too. And raise my hand. I'm guilty of that myself. I mean, we've been in business for 8 years, and there are plenty of sort of the small business websites that we built 6, 7, 8 years ago, which, circling back to now, I mean, well beyond ready to reinvest in refreshing their websites or adding new technologies, marketing automation, which didn't even exist back then, that exists now that we can incorporate into their websites. Or maybe they've elevated their business and now they want to move into e-commerce and we can resell to them. So awesome advice for product and service, I feel. It's also turning your customers into advocates. And I forget what podcast I was listening to, what piece of software, but somebody said that when they launched their new version of the software, what they did is they included a great feedback system to get features built into the product. And they had a PR problem. People thought that the software was too clunky. It was too slow. It just wasn't good. And then they started taking customer input and they started shipping features that a majority of customers wanted. And then the community at large, this wasn't a WordPress product, but the community at large started defending the software and the features because they felt that they were invested in the production of this, right? So they were no longer this nameless company with some developers in a room building this stuff and telling people what to do. They were accepting the information, the input. They were building what people wanted, and now people supported it and even defended it because they felt like they had some skin in the game. Like, that's my feature. Like, I wanted that feature. How dare you say that feature sucks?
When I joined Emphasis, which was 9.5 years ago, almost 10 years ago, it was an enterprise software, right, for a particular vertical market in housing, and some of the customers, which are cities and city governments and county governments, they had created their own user group that they had created so they could complain and fight with the company, right? Like, we're going to gather everybody's advice and we're going to get their feedback, and then we're going to send it to you and kind of shove it down your throats because you're not listening to the customer. And I came on board right after the CEO had started building some bridges and relationships with them. And by the time I was, heavily involved, we were running user conferences. We'd have 400 or 500 people that were users from all the different clients come to, a location once a year to have an event. But at the event, we would do the whole process of picking the new product advisory board, right? The new advisory board with people from the community, right, that would help shape the priorities. And I, as a product manager, right, I would help say, here's all the things we could do this year. Which ones are the most important to you? And this team of like 8 people would go and prioritize and pick which were the 8 they thought were the most important. And then we would announce at the conference, our roadmap for the next year is going to be these 5 things, right? And people would grumble, except they wouldn't grumble to me anymore. They wouldn't grumble to the CEO anymore. They'd grumble to the product advisory group who were their peers, and their peers would defend it. Their peers would say, yes, I understand what you're saying, but you're in the 1% or you're in the 5%. We're trying to solve the majority of the problem, or we're trying to solve this, or this is a bigger priority given, impending legislation. And so in the end, we didn't have that fight anymore. We had onboarded that support and got them to be ambassadors of the product. This is where you see companies like Rainmaker, right? Copyblogger, Rainmaker Digital. They built the Rainmaker platform, but in the platform, they allow customers to become advocates by having their own affiliate link, right? And so you're like, oh no, this is a product that I am putting out to people. But what does that naturally do? If you've turned your customers into ambassadors, you've also turned your customers into people who really give you feedback because they don't want to get embarrassed in front of their friends. So some of the best feedback that Rainmaker Digital gets is from their own customers, not from the prospects that want to buy, but from people inside going, this is harder than I want it to be, and I don't want to bring my friends over to this and have them go through this problem. And so you get the good feedback, you get a loop there, but you also get them to be ambassadors.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. It's awesome stuff. I want to shift gears now, and I want to I want you to give me sort of your rapid fire approach on how you've launched your new blog and your new concept. Like, let me know what it was like to, hey, did the name just come to your head and you were like, boom, this is what I'm going to do. This is the perfect name. And then tell me what it's like to be Chris Lema and sit down and go, all right, how do I build this website? Which theme do I use? Which plugin am I going to use? Give me that 1, 2, 3 combo of how you sat down and conceptualized all this to launch.
So, first of all, I think you know me by now. So I bought the domain maybe a year and a half ago. So I don't do anything spur of the moment. Bought the domain, had the domain, played with it, even wrote out the spec of what it would be, and worked with the Borns at Born Creative to create kind of the sample site, and then pulled it back and said, it's not ready yet. I'm not ready to launch this yet because I got really heavy into other work, and I just knew I didn't have the time to do it. But it all comes out of a conversation that I had with my friend Syed Balki at Cabo Press, I think the first year, so a couple years ago. And he said, I love what you're bringing to the WordPress ecosystem. I love that you're involved in the WordPress ecosystem. But all of your leadership and management stuff, all the coaching of teams and building up of teams and all the stuff you've done in leadership, and if you didn't know, I have a master's degree in leadership specifically, right? Which means I've also read a ridiculous amount of research and I've written like ridiculous amounts of papers on the stuff. He's like, all of that stuff that we talk about when Syed and I are talking about his company or his other things, or we talk with other companies about, that's not really a WordPress thing. Like, you should do that outside. Like, you could do all of that outside of WordPress and drive it up. And I said, you're right. I should think about that. But I brought you here to challenge other people. I didn't come here to challenge me, right? But that is the nature of having really good friends, is you have people who will step up to you and say, yeah, you're kind of coasting. Right? When are you going to do big things, important things? I have another group of friends I meet with once a year and have for 25 years. And we met just 2 or 3 months ago. We met while Pressnomics was happening, which is why I couldn't make this last year's Pressnomics. We meet once a year, every year. And 7 years ago, they were like, what are you doing? You're hiding. You're not doing anything. And that led us to the 2-year journey of looking for a new place to live and looking for new opportunities. And that got me into the WordPress ecosystem. So this year, I met with them and they did the same thing. Like, well, why aren't you running a really large company? Why aren't you doing, like, how come you're not an exec at Verizon, right? Which I'm like, first of all, I don't know that that's the pinnacle of my, like, I'm not sure that's my version of success. But point taken, right? And so out of that conversation, out of the tail end of last year and thinking through at what point do I wrap up the stuff at Crowd Favorite, and what point do I say, thank you for the great opportunity, and I hope I've left this in a really good spot, but I am a product guy. I'm going to move off so you guys keep doing your services. I don't wake up in the morning jazzed to do services. I wake up in the morning jazzed to think about products. And so it's been great to help my friend. It's been great to do this, but at some point it's time to move on. All of that swirling around, and the challenge in the early spring here with my buddies saying, it's time for you to do bigger. It's time for you to do better. It's time for you to do something serious and leave a mark. And I was like, yeah, okay, you're right. So I circled back to Beyond Good and said, okay, part of the trick, and you and I know this so well, is you just got to hit publish, right? You just have to start. So I spent a lot of time thinking about the domain name. I spent a lot of time looking at a variety of domains. I bought the domain name a year and a half ago. I've had it. I've written up plans. I've scoped up design. I've done a lot of different work, and finally got to a place of saying, I'm going to do this. And then I sat down and I wrote 3 or 4 articles, I think 2 or 3 of which have been published by now. And I said, this is the tone and shape of the way I want to do it. I actually spun up a new Twitter account, which again it's such a weird experience to start from zero, like 0 page views, 0 followers, just start anew. And when I went to build the website, I did what I tell my customers to do, which most of us never do, right? We all come up with this whole, like, you gotta do this big thing, and you gotta spend all this money in design, you gotta build a beautiful site, and I'm like, no. The value proposition of the website is the content, and so the value proposition requires 3 things. Number 1, a site. Number 2, content, and number 3, a way to subscribe to an email list. Those are the 3 things it needs. So if you looked on day 1, there wasn't even an about page, there wasn't a contact page. It was just articles, right? Like, here it is, right? So I used a Genesis theme, and I said, look, I know Genesis. I love Beaver Builder, but I know Genesis, and I knew that Genesis had several child themes that would just work. Like, I don't have to do a thing. So I loaded up one of the most recent ones. I think it's called Digital Pro. Loaded up. There was a little funkiness with some white space, so I made a tweak or 2 in CSS. But other than a tweak or 2, I just replaced an image, dropped in the stuff, wrote the articles, added ConvertKit, and said, I'm done. Now, is there a million things more to do? What happens when I bring in Opt-in Monster? What happens when I bring in other forms? What happens when I do all sorts of – great, but that's not what will drive it. When I first started chrislema.com, it took me months to get 100 page views, right? Months. And when I got 100 page views, I called my wife into my office, and I'm like, look, honey, I got up to, like, it's going up, and I got up to 100. She's like, it's okay, it'll go back down, right? Like, she's like, yeah, whatever, right? I don't really care. So on day 1, mostly because I retweeted it, not from just Beyond Good, but from Chris Lema. On day 1, I had 300, 400, 500 page views. And I was like, okay, but I don't know if this will sustain it, right? On day 1, I had 0 Twitter followers. So I'm doing the thing that, again, I tell people to do. Spin up an account. Make sure you write up the bio or the description. Make sure you add photos so that you look like a legit account. And then start following some of the people that you would like to listen to. Not so much that they'll follow you, but start following. Use a hashtag in the bio so that you can articulate what you're really about so that people can find you that way. And I think I have maybe now 50 followers, right? I guess. I don't know. But it's still more than I'm following, right? Like, I think I'm following 25 or 30, and I think I have 50 or 60 followers. And so the ratios are about right, which is nice. It's just starting. Soledad O'Brien, who I don't know personally, followed me yesterday, and I did a happy dance, right? Like, you remember that first when someone famous follows your Twitter account, and you're like, oh my God, they totally must want to hear me. They don't. Like, I don't know how they found it and they clicked it. Oh, it's leadership. Let's just click it and see what happens. So I did the happy dance just because it happened. I didn't do the happy dance because I thought, okay, this is significant. But I spent very little time on the website. And right away when I posted it inside the Genesis group on Facebook, one of the people said, do you have concerns that you didn't change the design at all. Like, I mean, you changed the photo or whatever, but you like that you didn't.
Saw that. I did see that. Right? I saw that.
And I said at some point I'll have to write a long post about this. But the short answer is no, I don't care, because the design is good enough, the schema markup is good enough, and what people are going to come to is the headline and the post content, and that's what I care about. And a year from now, and this is what I did with Chris Lema, right? I started the website, it looked one way, and then 6 to 8 months in, I made a change, and then, 6 or 8 months later, I made another change, and eventually got to what it is today. And people just forget that, it's not about how pretty the design is, it's about how well the value's delivered. That's where I focus. So for me, Genesis was easy to start with, but you could do it with 2016. You could do it with anything, just whatever and get it up and running.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's funny. It's, it's no different than our conversation about, do you pay for a plugin or do you go try to find these free things? And, if like you and I, if you dip your toe into a large community of WordPress users on Facebook, let's say, and you post something in there and they go, oh my God, I would never pay for that, right? Find a free solution. Like, no, that's not always the right answer. And much like I forget where I saw your post of the announcement, and I saw some of those comments come through like, gee, you should have changed it from the default theme. It's like, do you think that people have such limited time anyway that they are there to read the content? They aren't there to go, gee, is this pixel off? And maybe if you used this other shade of blue, I would have maybe paid attention more to the words on the page. And the truth doesn't exist.
The truth. So I spun up a second site, which is called My Headphone Collection.
Oh yeah, yep.
Because I own like 20 headphones, and I'm always buying more. I'll be honest on this show. This is just an easy. I'll have some affiliate links, but it's an easy way to write off my addiction to buying headphones, right? Like, as long as there's an outlay of whatever, I can say, no, this is a business site, and I spend money on headphones, so it's a cost of doing business. So I built it more for that, but I also built it because I get a lot of questions, right? People send me a lot of Twitter DMs, and even sometimes publicly on Twitter, like, hey, what's the best headphones? And I'm like, well, yeah, I happen to know a decent amount about headphones, so here you go. So I spun up the site. The site, again, I'm not even using a child theme for Genesis. I'm using Genesis with and I wrote an article about it on chrislema.com, right? That just said, if you add one of the plugins that lets you do creates an abstraction so that you can put your own CSS in, and you create something like you add a plugin called Code Snippets where you can add your own function codes. If you don't plan to make a ton of changes, that's enough, right? That's that's my version of a child theme, right? And some people have read it and gone, no, you don't understand what a child theme is. I'm like, you're right.
Oh yeah.
But other people have said, I thought you were crazy when I read the title, but when I read your article, yeah, it makes sense. I'm like, if you go to My Headphone Collection, which currently has one, today we'll publish another one, but it has one theme or one headphone review. Over time, people aren't coming for the website. They're not coming to look at the site. They're coming to read a review. They Googled something, they got a headphone, and they're like, let me read about this. That's it. It's the way I work at Wikipedia. I go to Wikipedia. I don't think about line spacing. I don't think about margins. I don't think about color. I don't think about anything other than like when they put the banner at the top to donate. And I think, okay, I probably should donate given how much I use this site. But other than that, I just read and then I leave. And that's the way most of my websites are. Like, just read, get what you need, and move on. And so, I've definitely I've done exactly what I tell my customers to do. Most of my customers are more like, well, no, I need to go into a big formal launch. I need to go into a big website. And for some people that really works. I find that the faster you get up and running, I have one more coming out, one more site called.
You need a job. Get this man a job so he stops watching.
I have one more site coming out that is a multi-author blog called cigarquestions.com.
Oh, cool.
And some of my friends in the WordPress community and I are going to be writing answers to cigar questions, right? And again, it will be a ridiculously simple site because it's the content that I care about. It's not the rest, right? So as long as the design doesn't get in the way, right? Design is supposed to help us, but it's also not supposed to get in the way. I think sometimes we create those beautiful homepages and people are still like, well, how do I get to the meat of the substance of this site? I just want to make that really available quickly.
Yeah. Your poor wife now, she's going to be looking at all these Google Analytics charts every time on all these multiple sites now. Look, honey, look at this chart. Look at this one.
Yeah. Look.
It's great stuff, Chris. Thanks for taking the time today to chat with us about all the stuff you have going on and giving us some great advice for product and service. One of the doors officially opening, any kind of new information coming out for Beyond Good that we can all wait for, or anything new in your life?
So the site is up. The articles are up. Separate from the site and the audience that I'm building slowly at Beyond Good, which is all about leadership and management and coaching. I know there are a lot of SaaS products out there in the coaching space, from Jigsaw to Coach Accountable to Coaching Cloud. There are a lot of different ones, but I am looking at building and this is the first time I've said it out loud, right? I'm looking at building a coaching platform, a coaching SaaS. I do a lot of coaching and advising, and you get to the point where you're like, maybe there's something here. So I'm dipping into that a little bit. So that will be announced primarily on Beyond Good, because it's an outshoot. It's a productized version of something that is an outshoot of all that leadership and coaching material. So at some point that'll come out, but me and my buddy Seth are working on this, and we've got a couple little pieces put together. We're not fully done. He's playing with some video stuff right now that I think will be really powerful, and then we'll see if we take this off. But at the same time, right, I want to be very clear with people. While I'm looking at building a product, while I'm playing with this stuff, and I'm writing on several different blogs, and I'm getting stuff out there, and I'm doing things, I am also consulting with some companies, and I am talking about different possible roles. I find that, and I wrote about this on chrislema.com the other day, the best value that I contribute is when all of my value is being contributed, right? And that means if I'm building a product, a SaaS, or if I'm writing on a blog, I'm only using one part of what I do and what I know. And so sometimes you have to look at other bigger, larger businesses with larger visions to say, oh, if I step in here, I get to use all of my background. I get to use all of my skill sets. And that's where I contribute the most value. So some people are like, oh, no, you got to stay on your own. You got to stay independent. I'm like, I don't really feel the need to do that. I'm enjoying my independence right now, and I'm enjoying what I get to spin up and do because of it. But I am also looking at some others, and joining a company at some point wouldn't be a betrayal of the dynamics that I'm pursuing right now. It's just something that comes alongside it.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. I think sometimes people, of course, the freedom is great, and sort of the be your own boss kind of thing is amazing, and or at least the ideas of that are great. And a lot of folks think that there is performance or success is tied to this one little thing, right? Like it's like you are only successful if this, which is not the case. And sometimes people, especially in our space, say, don't work for a company, do it on your own, and you have to. Yeah, that's how we will label you successful. It's that's not the case. Being on a team or giving back to a team is certainly the same, and at least in my eyes, anyway.
Yeah.
Amazing stuff, Chris. Thanks for joining us. Where can folks find you on the web to say thanks?
I'm over at chrislema.com, which is the primary one. Of course, I've just spun up a new website called Beyond Good. If you're into leadership and mentoring, I have a new one called My Headphones Collection if you like headphones. And soon I'll have cigarquestions.com if you have a question about cigars. So I am not hiding online is what I'm saying here.
Yeah. Awesome. Thanks a lot, Chris.
All right. Take care.